Prices doubling every 15 hours. Workers paid twice a day and racing to spend it all by noon. A banknote with 20 zeros printed on it. And a national currency whose entire supply, all of it added together, ended up worth less than 1 American penny. This is not a thought experiment. This is Hungary, 1946, the worst inflation ever recorded in human history, by a margin nothing has ever come close to. And the strangest part? It ended almost overnight, in what looks like an economic miracle. A miracle with a hidden price that almost nobody talks about. Stay with me, because that ending changes how you'll think about every banknote in your wallet. In the summer of 1946, a street sweeper worked his way down a boulevard in Budapest, pushing great drifts of paper into the gutter. Not leaves, not trash, money, swept away like garbage, because that is exactly what it had become. This is the story of how money itself died, and what it took to bring it back. I tell one forgotten money story like this every single week. So if that sounds like your kind of history, subscribe now, and come with me to 1946. To kill a currency this thoroughly, you need more than bad luck. You need a catastrophe. Hungary had just lived through one of the worst any country has ever faced. By the end of the Second World War, Hungary wasn't just defeated, it was a battlefield. The siege of Budapest leveled the capital. Every bridge across the Danube lay at the bottom of the river. Around 40% of the country's entire national wealth had been destroyed, and the war's end brought no relief. Hungary owed heavy reparations to the Soviet Union, paid for an occupying army, and collected almost no taxes from an economy in ruins. Here's the bitter irony. The pengő itself had been created in 1927 for one specific purpose: to end the runaway inflation Hungary suffered after the First World War. The currency that was born to stop an inflation was about to die in the worst one ever recorded. It is hard to overstate how complete the ruin was. The siege of Budapest lasted 100 days and left the capital in rubble. Factories stood empty. Much of their machinery had been hauled away as war booty. The railways had lost most of their locomotives. In 1945, Hungary's industrial output was barely a third of what it had been before the war. This was the economy that now had to feed a nation and pay reparations on top of it. The government faced an impossible equation: enormous bills, an empty treasury, a broken tax system. And it reached for the one machine that still worked perfectly: the printing press. Here's the problem with that number. With printing money to pay your bills, it works. Once. The first wave of fresh banknotes buys real things: food, coal, wages. But every new note quietly takes a slice of value from every note already in someone's pocket. Printing money is a hidden tax, a tax on everyone who holds cash. And people are not stupid. They notice. Once Hungarians understood that every pengő lost value by the hour, they did the only rational thing. They got rid of pengő the moment they touched one. Workers were paid daily, then twice a day. Families waited at factory gates at noon, took the money, and ran to buy anything: bread, nails, firewood, before evening prices arrived. Economists call this the velocity of money. In Hungary, money didn't circulate. It fled. And that's the death spiral. The faster people spend, the faster prices rise. The faster prices rise, the more the government must print to cover the same bills. The more it prints, the faster people spend. Around and around, each turn tighter than the last. Then the government made a fascinating mistake. To protect tax revenue from melting away, it created a second, parallel unit. The pengő, the tax pengő, indexed to inflation, adjusted daily. Think about what that means. The very institution issuing the pengő handed the entire country an official tool for escaping the pengő. It was meant as a shield for the treasury. It became an exit door for everyone, and the original currency was left to burn. When the issuer of a currency builds the alternative to its own money, it has signed the death certificate. Now the numbers stopped making human sense, so Hungary started renaming them. First came the pengő, 1 million pengő, treated as a single unit. Within months that was worthless too. So they introduced the pengő, 1 trillion pengő. 1 pengő equaled a million pengő. Shoppers were doing scientific notation at the bakery. By July 1946, the monthly inflation rate reached 41.9 quadrillion %. That's 4.19 times 10 to the 16th power, a number with no meaning in daily life, which is precisely the point. Prices doubled every 15 hours. Restaurants learned not to print menus. Stores repriced shelves between the morning and the afternoon. Real commerce slid backwards into barter. Eggs, flour, and lard became the actual currency of Hungary, and part of many workers' wages was simply paid in food. The absurdities piled into every corner of daily life. State radio announced the day's pengő rate each morning, the way other countries announce the weather. A phone call, a tram ticket, a postage stamp. Each cost millions, then billions, then numbers nobody bothered to pronounce anymore. Old banknotes, too worthless to spend, found second lives as wallpaper and kindling. And since a week's wages now required a basket instead of a wallet, many employers gave up on cash entirely and paid their workers in bread, potatoes, and cooking fat. On July 11, 1946, the the national bank issued its final, record-setting banknote. 100 million B pengő, 100 quintillion pengő, a 1 with 20 zeros. They had already printed the next one, 1 sextillion pengő, 10 to the 21st, but it never left the vaults. There was no point anymore. Here is the fact that captures the entire collapse. When it was all over, the total value of every pengő banknote in circulation in Hungary, all of it, added together, came to roughly 1/10 of 1 American cent. An entire nation's money supply, worth less than a penny. And then, it stopped, almost literally overnight. On August 1st, 1946, Hungary introduced a new currency, the forint. The exchange rate tells you everything about what it was replacing. 1 forint was worth 400 octillion pengő, 4 followed by 29 zeros. The largest currency conversion in history. But here's the real lesson, and it's the part most people miss. The trick was not the new name. Anyone can print different paper. The forint held because, this time, the money was anchored to something real. Hungary's gold reserves, which had been hauled west on a special train in the final chaos of the war and ended up in American custody, were returned in 1946, and gold backed the new currency. The central bank was barred from simply financing the government's deficit. Budgets were forced toward balance. Real taxes started flowing again, and the launch was merciless by design. There was no gradual transition and no compensation. Whatever pengő a family still held, in a drawer, in a bank account, was simply extinguished at the exchange. 2 years of wages, savings, and debts, written off. The middle class started over from zero. It is one of history's strangest bargains, a nation agreeing to forget everything it was owed, in exchange for a currency that would simply hold still. And Hungarians took the deal, almost with relief. Anything was better than the sprint to the bakery. Trust in money is never free. Hungary had to pay for it, with gold, with discipline, and with rules that tied the government's own hands. And once it paid, something remarkable happened. Prices simply held. People who had spent a year sprinting to the bakery learned, slowly, to keep money in their pockets again. Nearly 80 years later, Hungary's record still stands, and nothing has come close. Zimbabwe's infamous collapse in 2008, the one with the $100 trillion bill, saw prices double every 25 hours or so. Germany's legendary Weimar inflation of 1923, the one with wheelbarrows of cash, needed almost 4 days to double prices. Hungary did it in 15 hours, month after month, until the currency simply ceased to mean anything. That 100 quintillion pengő note, once barely worth a bus ticket, is now a collector's item, a small paper monument to what happens when a nation's trust in its own money runs out completely. And the forint, the currency born from those ashes in August 1946, it is still Hungary's money today, nearly 80 years later. The cure outlived everyone who invented it. Strip away the zeros, and Hungary follows a pattern you'll see again and again on this channel. A devastated state with bills it cannot pay reaches for the printing press. The public catches on and stops holding the money, and the money dies. And the cure, every single time, is not a new name on the same paper. It's something real behind it, and rules that stop the printing. Half a century later, on the other side of the world, another country fought the same monster with one of the strangest tricks in monetary history. It invented a currency that didn't physically exist to teach its own people to stop believing in inflation. That country was Brazil, and that story is next. This is Paper Empires, the wildest true stories of money, markets, and the economies that shaped our world. If this is your kind of history, subscribe. The next story is already on the way.